So, it's come to this, has it? Duel Monsters has been building up to this moment. The final duel between Atem and Yugi. I find this particular duel very fascinating, because there's a ton of philosophical and thematical stuff that goes on behind the scenes. For example, after Yugi beats Bakura, the ultimate force of evil in this particular series, he now has to face off and battle against Atem himself, who's not only his closest friend, but is also the ultimate duelist, possibly the greatest of all time. At least where Duel Monsters itself is concerned. I'm not really sure how well he stacks up against the likes of either Jaden or Yusei, and I honestly don't really think it's fair to make that comparison, considering the fact that there is such a span of time between Atem's days and Jaden and Yusei's days, in terms of dueling prowess. There's also a lot going on with Yugi himself. After all, he knows that if he wins, Atem will go on to the afterlife, which is a good thing, since there wasn't much more for Atem to do once he regained his memory. But Yugi's conflicted here. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to strike Atem down, I think, because he's both afraid to and doesn't really know how to move on without Atem being in his life. I mean, think about it. It's like losing a pet that you've had for a long time. I mean, once it goes, you're at a loss for words, and it's hard to move on. The same is true for Yugi here. Joey even states that these two have shared a body for years. This, combined with Teia's statement at the beginning of Pharaoh's Memories, where she states that they've been on adventures like this for the past 4 years, means that Atem and Yugi have essentially been sharing the same body for almost half a decade, which is a pretty big chunk of time to spend together regardless of the context. So yeah, there's a lot at stake here for our two protagonists, and the emotional roller coaster is just beginning for the audience. But now, on to the duel itself. The main cast all awakened by the Tablet of Lost Memories. Seto tosses the Millennium Eye to Atem, stating that he's gonna need it. Seto then starts to leave, with Bakura suddenly emerging. Don't worry guys, don't worry. Stop screaming. It's not yummy, Bakura. Don't worry. Bakura then falls into Joey's lap and complains that he needs some food. Joey then hands Atem the Millennium Ring, with Atem stating that since Zork has vanished, so has the evil spirit in the ring. Fat chance. I'm not gonna spoil it here, but something happens in the Dark Side of Dimensions movie which completely retcons this statement. But I'll get to that later. Whew, much later. Atem then begins collecting the items laid by the Tablet of Lost Memories. We even get some wrap-up on what happened to Priest Seto following Atem's departure. Apparently, Seto went on to become a great ruler following Atem's departure. Although it's too bad that he couldn't have kept Kasara. She would have made a great queen. Plus, I'm such a hopeless romantic that I would have loved to see their romance develop and reach a natural conclusion, which would have been Priest Seto taking the throne and having Kasara by his side as his wife and as his queen. I just want them to have a happy ending. Is that so much to ask? Merrick states that since Atem now has his memory back, that his family's duty as Tomb Keepers is over. We'll get even more resolution to previous storylines later, but this is just awesome to see right now. It feels like an amazing culmination of everything that's been happening within Duel Monsters so far. But Atem states that he has to seal all 7 items away in order to enter the spirit world. Ashizu and Merrick agree to lead them to the Millennium Stone. The inscription above the stone reads as follows: "To the spirit world thou may proceed, but first thou must complete this deed. Return the items whence they came, and speak aloud the Pharaoh's name." All these inscriptions and instructions really add to the mythology and make it seem deeper than I think was originally intended. They go to a ship, on which they sail to where the Palace of the Stone is located. Before they get on the ship, however, Solomon, Mokuba, and Duke all arrive to greet them. But what I'm more curious about is where the heck they got the money to afford this ride. After all, if you've been following this series, you know that they took a plane to Egypt in order to get to the Tablet of Lost Memories, at the start of Pharaoh's Memories. And that plane ride must have cost them at least a couple grand to fly there in the first place. But now that number has to at least go up by at least a couple hundred more. I don't know, maybe Seto pulled some strings, but that's not really in his character to do that. I mean, he'd probably only do it for himself and maybe Mokuba. We get a lot more cameos, and every single one of them is extremely satisfying. Pegasus narrates over the appearances, and, well, Pegasus, take it away.
Everything I spent my life creating has been leading up to this. From the moment I received the Millennium Eye, to the moment I recreated the ancient Shadow Games in the form of Duel Monsters. It was fate's hand guiding me to set the stage for the Pharaoh's final journey home. But I wasn't the only one led by fate. Every person the Pharaoh encountered along the way was destined to play a role in his journey. And I'm willing to bet most of them didn't even know it. Each individual, no matter how utterly clueless, was a necessary piece needed to complete the puzzle of the Pharaoh's life. Be they weird fisherman duelists, or annoying mousy little girls. All of these people have one thing in common. Each one is connected by a young man named Yugioh, and that mysterious alter ego of his. And not only did these individuals help Yugi, but in turn, Yugi touched each of their lives as well.
So they're on the ship, with the Shizu stating that they're all here to see Atem's final rite of passage. The phrase rite of passage, if I know my history, was essentially the equivalent of a man coming into his own, or a boy graduating into adulthood. Merrick states that there's another inscription on the Millennium Stone, which mentions a battle ritual, in this case a duel, or as Little Karibo describes it, a children's card game. Atem states that in this ritual, he has to lose the game. Talk about having an uphill battle. I mean, Atem has never lost a duel legitimately, unless you count Duelist Kingdom, and I don't really count his duel with Raphael in Waking the Dragons because of the seal's influence, and mostly because it was a part of his journey through that arc of dealing with his own morality. Here, though, he has to lose the duel both voluntarily and legitimately, rather than simply throwing the match. I mean, Duke even states that winning is easy for Atem. I mean, he has the track record to prove as such, but being able to accept defeat is possibly the greatest test of his character, which I wholeheartedly agree with. In fact, the loss Atem suffers here kind of humbles him, and in a weird sort of way, it teaches him humility. But I'll get to that later. They toss around who will get to duel Atem in the battle, from Joey to Seto, and then to Yugi himself. I hate to say it, but as good as Joey is and how much his character's grown, he just wouldn't be able to defeat Atem at this point in the timeline. Not just that, but Atem would be kind of hesitant, I'm assuming, due to his and Joey's past friendship. Seto, though, is a completely different story, and I realize I'll probably get crucified by all the Seto fans by saying this, but, well, he would just get curve stomped. There's no argument. After all, at this point in the timeline, Atem possesses all 3 Egyptian god cards, and Seto's only ace in the hole at this point would be his Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, which might be able to take down Obelisk provided the dragon gets on the field quick, fast, and in a hurry, but it wouldn't be able to stand up against the likes of either Slifer or Ra. And don't even get me started on their own individual special abilities. On top of all that, there's another factor. An unlikely one, but another factor nonetheless. Seto could still threaten suicide. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, in the Japanese version of Seto's duel with Yugi on the steps to face Pegasus, he threatens suicide because he doesn't want to lose, and because Mokuba's life is hanging in the balance. Now, he could do it again, although it wouldn't be in his character at this point in the timeline to do this, much less later on in GX. So yeah, either way, Seto isn't a good opponent for this scenario. Yugi shocks everyone by stating that he's going to duel Atem. Seto tries to offer him some cards to use, but Yugi rejects them, stating that it would only be fair if he uses the deck that he and Atem had built together through the years. Speaking of years, Yugi reflects on how he built the Millennium Puzzle 8 years ago, which is actually stated in the Japanese version, and how he's changed. We'll get more of this later on, but this is a really good appetizer, if you will.
Before I solved the Millennium Puzzle, I was a completely different person. Timid, shy, lonely. But ever since that day, when the Pharaoh and I joined together, I've been strong and confident. And if I win that duel tomorrow, I'll prove that I'm ready to face the world on my own. All I have to do is remember everything the Pharaoh taught me, and I can do this!
We get some nice shots of the other members of the group, like Merrick, Joey, Ashizu, and Odeon, who are just waiting and looking on. It's a nice, calm moment. Yugi finally finishes his deck, and Atem emerges, asking if it's safe to come out, as he wanted to give Yugi some privacy while he was assembling his deck. Atem then crafts his own deck, stating the following.
I feel as though every opponent I've ever faced was preparing me for this moment. The moment that will decide the fate of my spirit. If I win, I remain here, sealed within the Millennium Puzzle. But if I lose, I'm free to enter the spirit world where I belong. Within that box lies Yugi's deck, chosen from a collection that we created together, but built completely on his own. And now it is my turn to do the same.
Taya, pretty much throughout the build-up to this entire battle, has second thoughts about the whole thing, as she doesn't really want Atem to go. I'm assuming this is the case either due to romantic feelings, or simply because of the bond that Atem has formed with her and the others over the years. But, since this isn't explicitly stated within the dub, I can't really call on either for an answer, and so it's left in the air. They arrive at the Millennium Stone itself. Don't worry, this time it's not possessed by evil spirits. Stop your worrying, please. Ashizu instructs Yugi to place all 7 Millennium items inside of the stone, which he begins doing. Solomon then states something very poetic, that this whole ordeal first began when Yugi solved the Millennium Puzzle, and that it will all end the second he returns it. There's some eye, I think it's the Eye of Uwasha or something like that, connected to the stone, and it immediately separates Yugi and Atem, confirming to Seto that they did indeed inhabit the same body. Now comes to a moment that may seem odd to a lot of you, but I thought I would bring it up anyway. That being the issue of height. I'm gonna freeze frame on this one shot here, of them standing side by side. Now, don't get me wrong, it's nice that Yugi is at the same height as Atem. I mean, I think it symbolizes that he's risen to, or is at least at Atem's skill level. But at the same time, the movies, particularly Pyramid of Light, completely ruin this. In fact, Pyramid of Light makes Yugi out to be a friggin' dwarf, when it was supposed to be taking place right after Waking the Dragons, in which Yugi himself was much taller. Now, one could just chop this down, stating that a different animation team worked on the movies, and that particular set of animation was made years ago. And people wouldn't have want to invest the money to recreate it. And yeah, there's a decent argument for that, but at the same time, it's really annoying, because it creates a lot of inconsistencies as far as the official timeline is concerned. But that's neither here nor there, I just thought I'd bring it up. This brings up another topic. A lot of casual viewers of this series, particularly on Twitter, have stated that I've been way too lenient on Duel Monsters and that I'm just a biased fanboy. It seems to them that if I was a true fan, like Civit, who not only criticizes the dub, but also hurls profanities at it whenever he can, that I would have gone over this with a fine-tooth comb, and basically been much harsher on Duel Monsters than I have been. Well, no offense to Civit if he's watching, but in my opinion, what you're doing by just cursing at the product rather than giving a proper critique is just destroying art for the sake of getting views. Now don't get me wrong, he does seem to go over each storyline, which I have no problem with, but the majority of his videos on the franchise, at least his Duelist Kingdom and Battle City ones, are mainly him just criticizing the inconsistencies of the show and the real-life card game, rather than examining how the dub handled a particular storyline and comparing it to the sub version. If any of you are confused by the comparing to the sub version comment, please allow me to explain. Once I'm done with the dubs of Duel Monsters, GX, and 5Ds, I'm going to go back over each series in their Japanese forms, and I'm really looking forward to that, not for the sake of views or to anger a fan base, but to get my true and honest opinion on it out on paper, and then later on in video format. But anyway, back to the dub. Ashizu states that this duel will determine their destinies. Atem then states that he's going to give this duel everything he's got in order to test how ready they truly are to separate. Yugi states the same thing, and the final duel of the series begins.
Are you ready for this?
That's what we're here to find out, right?
Let's duel!